There's a problem in our world. There are still far too many places where children are not able to access education simply because they cannot afford it. Major charitable organizations do a great job addressing this problem, but the country of Belize is overlooked. And at the very age when these children ought to be developing their full potential, they're not able to continue their education simply because they cannot afford it. PathLight, together with our donors and our sponsors, is changing the equation. We empower the children of Belize to receive a quality education, to break free from poverty, and to reach their God-given potential. We do this by providing these children with access to school, covering all school-related costs. But it's more than that. We offer them daily programming, mentoring, tutoring, character formation, leadership development, job skills, and spiritual transformation that allows them to become all that God has intended them to become. With your help, we can reach every child in Belize.
Hi, good day. My name is Paul Norales, and I'm a teacher trainer from Excelsior High School. Being a teacher today in Belize has many challenges, from physically not being able to teach our students to not having the necessary resources to do effective online sessions. But thanks to PathLight and the teacher training team, we have had the privilege of getting the necessary digital training to help our students and, by extension, our parents in our community to better cope with the new normal. PathLight has helped me as an educator to reach my potential and obtain the necessary classroom resources I need to help me better prepare for the students' home packages. PathLight has made a difference where it matters in helping me face these challenges. Thank you, PathLight, for truly being a pioneer in this ever-changing landscape of teaching.
Hi everyone, my name is Julio Miranda, and in this video I'll be sharing about my PathLight story. When I first started PathLight, I remember I was in standard 6 graduating from primary school. I applied for PathLight scholarship and I got accepted 2 weeks before I started school, in high school. And what can I say, I was happy, I was glad because I got the opportunity to go to high school, because I can say I live in a single parent family with my mom, because my dad left when I was 1 year of age, and it's been really rough for her raising me up alone. So yeah, but then PathLight entered my life, my family, and I will always be grateful for it, and may God bless them very much, because they have been a huge impact in my life.
Welcome everyone to Conversations sponsored by PathLight International. PathLight empowers children of Belize to receive a quality education, to break free from poverty, and to reach their God-given potential. For the past 4.5 years, it's been my privilege and my joy to serve as the CEO for PathLight. And I want to say to all of you, thank you so much for joining us today. PathLight Conversations has become an annual event where we engage our hearts and our minds on a topic that is current and is vital and important. We've made many friends along the way who've been gracious enough to help us with these: Bob Goff, Shane Claiborne, Jacqueline Fuller, Steve Haas, Mark Zarati. Today, we're blessed to have Reverend Dr. Brenda Salter McNeil. I had the privilege of first hearing Brenda at the Urbana Student Missions Conference. Let's just say that was many years ago, but I've been a big fan of Brenda ever since. I want to allow our board chairman and PathLight co-founder, Roy Goebel, to more formally introduce Brenda. So I want to turn it over to you, Roy.
Hey, thanks, Roger. Appreciate it.
You bet.
I remember when you first joined as CEO, and one of the first persons I said you need to go talk to was Brenda. So you flew up to Seattle to meet with her.
Yep, absolutely.
An important person for PathLight and for this topic of racial reconciliation.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I met Brenda at a conference in Hawaii. What a nice place to attend a conference. She and her husband, Derek, were there. My wife, Deanna, and I were there. And we hit it off immediately. We ended up spending a few extra days in Hawaii together, and we became fast friends. Since then, Brenda and I have worked together on a variety of different diversity projects, both in the church, but also in higher education. And I say that, and actually, it's more like Brenda guided this amateur through the process because she is just brilliant at this and has such a huge heart. And she was patient and wise as she helped me. Both Brenda and Derek have been to Belize several times with us. In fact, Derek was there on the very first trip that came up with the name of our organization. He was in the room when we came up with the word PathLight, and he was there when we christened it. And Brenda's worked with teachers and students in Belize. She has a heart for that. And Belize is a great place because it's one of the most multicultural nations in the world. It's still the most multicultural nation in all of Latin America. So Brenda's work has a real profound impact there. Professionally, Brenda's an author, a professor, a speaker, an advocate. I could go on and on. Her new book, Becoming Brave, just really floored me when I read it. And I'm going to share a little bit more about why that's true. But for right now, I'll have Brenda join us. And welcome, Brenda. It's great to have you here.
I'm honored. It's a good thing to have this opportunity to be with you. Thanks, Roy.
You know, whenever I see you, my smile gets bigger. Why is it?
I'm happy. We like each other, and it always makes us good to be in the same place, even virtually.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the non-virtual. So, boy, aren't we all getting ready to give a big hug to somebody? So, yeah.
Exactly.
Brenda, let's start with something fun here. I loved your book, and it caught me off guard, actually. And I'm going to ask a question about that in a moment. But I loved every page of it. But honestly, now you have to admit that page 128 is the most important page in the book, right?
Oh, that's the page. That's the page.
Yeah. That was actually one of the big surprises for me is that I'm reading through. You had told me I'm in the acknowledgments, which thank you. I appreciate that. But I'm reading through the book and I come to page 128 and I go, wait a minute, I know this guy. You actually told me in the book, and it was kind of a surprise, and it made me laugh out loud at the same time. So.
Well, I love our conversations. You know, I really do believe that reconciliation is not done in isolation, it's done in community. And what you said in introducing me is true. We're friends, we're in community, and you have a vantage point. You travel globally, the things you've seen, the books you've written, all of that. We've been conversant with one another. So I'm grateful that I get to do this work, but I really would be the first to say I don't do it alone. It really is a collaborative process. Reconciliation is not a one person thing. It's something that requires community.
Yeah. Oh, that great word. Thank you for leading with that, because you've been doing this work for 3 decades now. I've known you for almost 2 decades of that time.
That's right.
But the book really feels like a shift in strategy for me, and as if you're moving in a stronger, bolder direction, which obviously comes up in the title of the book, Becoming Brave. I remember hearing you preach about the book of Esther several years ago. And later when I talked about how you wanted to turn this into a book. But what we talked about then was quite a bit different than what you ended up writing. What happened in your change in thinking? How did that happen?
A funny thing happens, right? When you, a lot of things happen, Roy. first I'd say this. It's not a brag. I talk about being Pentecostal, not because I'm bragging about it, really. There's many things I would change about my Black church, Pentecostal small church growing up. But there was a sense that we're not leading God, God is leading us, you know? And it has formed me. It shaped how I do things, right? So one is that I thought I was going to write a book about what you heard me preach about, leadership, unlikely. That's what I thought it was about. But there is something about reconciliation. You know, my definition of it is that it's an ongoing spiritual process, which basically says somehow God intervenes in human affairs, and God gets to kind of navigate the course of what happens. And so over the course of probably 4 or 5 years, as I was writing what I thought was going to be about leadership and the next generation of leaders who would be like Esther, a lot of things happened. The global, cultural, social, political climate changed around me, you know, and it made me grapple with it. And that's the other thing about reconciliation. It's not just this head thing. It's an embodied thing. You know, you can't just write about things rationally or intellectually. You've got to live it, feel it, go into it. And I realized I was being transformed. I was being changed, and something more was being asked of me. And, you know, and I couldn't read Esther, someone for whom something more than what she expected was being asked of her, and not ask the question of myself. What is the social, political, cultural climate asking of me? And I didn't know it was going to call me to be brave. This book wasn't called Becoming Brave when I got started. But by the time I got to page 128, it was clear that I was going to have to swallow hard, because I was saying things now that I'd never quite said like this before.
Wow. That's exciting when I hear you describe that process. And what was it about the actual book of Esther, the story of Esther, that sort of triggered some of this? Or maybe it wasn't in the book, maybe it was some outside influence, but what was it specifically?
Yeah, it was both. And I'm really glad, because we both have authored things. And I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because neither of us write books to write books. You know, it's not like I thought, I just want to write a book. And there's way too much of that, in fact, right now, of people feeling like they'd like to see their name in print. And that I'm not motivated that way, nor are you. And we don't need that right now.
That said, I did put my book here.
Well, you should, because you've lived that book. I've read your book. I've endorsed your work. And I know when you talk about those places you've been and the people with whom you've interacted, you've had that experience, right? And so that's where books come from for me. So I realized that Esther captured my attention for a few reasons. One, most of us have heard this concept of for such a time as this, right? But it begs the question, what time is this? Right? You can, it's a nice, clear little cliche phrase biblically, for such a time as this, but it means nothing if we don't ask ourselves, what time is it? Where are we living? The time demanded something of Esther. And whether we like it or not, the time demands something of all of us. And I had to ask myself, given what I was living in, the climate, the divisiveness, the lack of truthfulness, because by that point, as I write in the book, the Oxford Dictionary had for its word of the year, post-truth, that we're in a time where truth is not truth. It's kind of like who gets to take the airways over, and that becomes the truth. And you know, all of that was the time in which I was living. And I had to say to myself, oh my God, I think I'm like Esther. And like her, I'm scared too. You know, she basically, her first response was, I don't want to do this. Mordecai, hey, you know, I could get in trouble. And you know me well enough to know that I'm really relational. I love people. I'm not a mean person. And the thought that I would say things more strongly than I'd ever said before frightened me, because I don't want people to think that I'm being mean-spirited, or that I'm motivated by some agenda, or that I'm trying to be political or partisan. I'm not. I love God. It's not an act for me. But I knew that all of those things and more I'd be accused of if I began saying things more strongly and more clearly, and made the connection between the spiritual and the social.
Right. Wow. when I read the book, somewhere along the way, I was reminded of the Langston Hughes poem, "What Happens to a Dream Deferred?" And it felt to me, and it really helped me to read the book since I know you well and you're a friend. So I could see your heart come out in the book, where the dream you had of reconciliation in the church, it seemed like it felt to you like it had been deferred and deferred and deferred. And eventually, as in the poem, that dream explodes.
Yes.
And it felt like this book was the first part of your dream exploding onto the scene.
Yeah.
Is that fair? I mean, I don't want to get
super beautifully fair, poetically fair. And I'm really grateful because I love that poem. I really do. Langston Hughes is one of my absolute favorite. He's prolific. And I've from a little girl known that poem, but never quite associated with me. But I do know that I represent not just my own feelings, but the feelings of many, many, many people who have hoped in the church, who have hoped in Christianity, who have hoped in the people who said, we really are serious about this. Really, we care, and have had me come speak and have, all of that. I've been all over the place. I've poured my guts out, and I'm not being dramatic. I really have. I wish I was kind of a half-hearted person, but you can even tell in this interview, I'm a pretty all-in chick.
None of us want you to be half-hearted, Brenda.
I'm just not half. So when I'm preaching, I'm not entertaining people when they go, gosh, she's just a preacher. She's so prophetic. I'm doing that for a reason. And I'm doing that with everything I've got because I believe in the church. I believe that we have been entrusted with the message of reconciliation. And then when I see us do the polar opposite to what it is we declare, the Bible says, yes, it breaks my heart. It is a dream deferred. And when that happens, and you're right, I've been doing this over 30 years. So, and what I was told is if you would just be nice enough, and if you would just be biblical enough, and if you would just, whatever enough, all of that kind of stuff. And I was all of that. And none of that produced the reconciliation that people swore they cared about. So that dream deferred has exploded. But I'll tell you something that I'm feeling right now. When I read that poem, I think explode in a bad way. And I'm sure it can happen in a bad way. But for me, it exploded in a good way. Like Esther, it called me out of that place of trying to play nice, and it caused me to be brave. I have come forth, and it feels pretty good. Amen.
That's great. That's great. I love that. I was working with a church one time on helping them become more diverse and a more diverse place for worship. And one step they took was to bring in more African-American preachers to do the pulpit on Sunday mornings. And I can remember talking to one of the African-American men that they had invited. And I won't mention him because he might be on this, who knows. But he said that it was an honor for him to be there. He greatly appreciated it. But he also knew he had been invited because he was safe. And he and I had a wonderful conversation about that. It kind of opened my eyes. This was a good, 10 or 15 years ago. And it opened to my eyes, even how, confession here, I have often referred to you, I don't think I've used the word safe, but I've often even referred to you as the person to bring in because you don't feel beat up and guilty when you have these conversations.
Right.
And a little bit of your book talks about that there's an element of maybe we need to do a little beat up. Not your words, those are my words.
Right.
But
I completely agree. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're on to something now. This is like us just chopping it up and people get a chance to watch us talking. Right? Yeah, we would do this if we were at your house or mine. I agree. And I think that, there is an evolution. And we know, again, the definition I have of reconciliation, I just want to put it out there, is that reconciliation is an ongoing spiritual process involving forgiveness, repentance, and justice that transforms broken relationships and and systems to reflect God's original intention for all creation to flourish. I believe that's what we're going after. And I realize now that my playing it safe was kind of trying to say to almost like a person who is sick and goes to a doctor and says, hey, doc, I'm really not well. I need your help. Could you please help me know what to do? And the doctor makes a diagnosis, right? And the person then says to the doctor, nah, I don't think I want to do that. It's almost like either you're really sick and you understand how urgently you need to get well, and you will therefore, I have to give it to you straight. You're going to have to make these changes if you want to get better. I feel like now, as opposed to seeing being direct as being mean spirited, I believe that if people really recognize how really sick racial and injustice and divisiveness and the lack of civility is, and we would confess and repent of that, then we don't have to tiptoe around that. I think I am not being a mean person to be an honest, truthful person to say, I care so much about you that I will not give you a diluted message or a half-hearted diagnosis. I will honestly tell you the truth about what it will take for you to get well. And if you really want to get well, you'd appreciate the directness of this, because we both understand the urgency of the times that we're living in, the urgency of the situation. So I'm starting to reframe what I think it is to be mean, because I thought being nice would kind of slowly bring people along to kind of like, you know, and now I feel like, no, the house is on fire. And what we don't need, what we don't need is a nice lady outside saying, the house is on fire. The house is on fire. I think we need a radical, direct, let's call a thing a thing. And if you really understand that this is where we are, then you'll be very thankful that I spoke it so clearly and so straightforwardly so that we can all make a change and do something differently.
Wow, that preaches.
I mean it too.
Yeah, I know you do. You started with, hey, we're in a conversation now. This is like if I'm at your house or you're at my house. And for those folks that are watching this, it's true. This is when Brenda and I get together over the table, and Dion and Derek are there. We have a glass of wine or a bottle of wine in front of us. I toss these things to you, and you get going, and we all love it.
This is us. This is us.
Yeah, this is how it goes. I love it. I love it. Brenda, you've been to Belize twice, I think, with us, and I'm just curious, when you were there, and I know how you so highly value education. When you were there in Belize, you worked with the students. What struck you about them, and did you learn anything in your time in Belize about the students, or what did you feel like they needed to learn from you?
Oh, no, the learning was mostly mine. I'm grateful that I had a chance to bring what God would give me to encourage and to support and to breathe life and just kind of say, I'm with you. But really, I was the one who was enriched. There's so much about Belize that I love. I mean that I literally do think about when I'll return, because I was so much blessed by the whole of it. I think the size of the country is important. The history of the country, who borders the country. It's almost a microcosm of what reconciliation could be on a national level. If a country with the same history and the same demographic, makeup of Belize, if there was a way that was harnessed, and I think I saw actually as we were writing one day, reconciliation was on a billboard somewhere. And so this notion of diversity and reconciliation is in Belize. And so I think I've not been in a country where it's a part of the national kind of fabric that reconciliation and this breadth of diversity is a part of who we are. And I see young people now being trained at PathLight to understand that a person with an education in a country that's not that big is small enough that people could actually get educated, rise in the ranks, become good at what they do, and have influence. And so, see, this is an Esther moment, because that was a young girl. Nobody would have picked her. She wouldn't have been on the front of a Time magazine or Who's. She She was a young girl from a working class family, a single parent family. No one would have said, oh yeah, she's destined for royalty. She's destined for leadership. But I now know that the combination of having cultural competency, she finds herself in Persia and can speak another language. She can do so fluently. So many of the kids at PathLight have that capability to right? There's so much analogous between the young people I met in Belize and this young woman who becomes the savior of an entire people group in this book of Esther. She has access because of her education. She is able, because she knows God, to have favor, and she finds herself with the potential to speak truth to power, so much so, and does it in such an interesting way, understanding what community can do. So as opposed to coming in, as I would have done if I was in the story, and just said, hey, they're going to kill people, we got to stop them, we got to stop them. She literally does something that brings community and table. And I remember eating in the cafeteria. I remember the women who cooked for us. There was something about the way food was used to bring people together. That was more than just a lunch. That was right? Something else goes on. That's in the culture of Belize. And I'm not blowing smoke. I'm not just saying this. If I could live someplace else, Belize is always one of the places I consider. I mean that.
That's great. That's great. Well, we'll get you to Hawaii before that. You know, I'm going to introduce a quick video here in just a moment, but I just had to share a story about when you were working with the students in Belize. And I can remember you being at Jaguar Creek. And I don't know, there were a lot of kids in the room, 50 anyway. And you pulled out a puzzle. Do you remember this?
I do.
You gave each one of the kids a piece and then said, you guys all have to put it together. So each kid in the room had one piece, or maybe two pieces, and they had to put it together. But if I recall correctly, you kept one piece back. Yeah. And when they got it all done, there was still a piece missing. And I thought, oh man, you're good with metaphors. That was really great. The students all look at it and go, we're missing a piece. And they're all looking at each other and looking, you ready?
That's right. And I wanted them to know we're not complete without you.
Right.
You're the missing piece, and we got to have you. And I believe that about the kids at PathLight. So, hey, everybody in Belize.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. All right, we're going to show just a real quick, speaking of students in Belize, what a coincidence that I should set it up this way. We're going to show a 1-minute little video of a student from Belize that wants to share from their heart.
Hello everyone, my name is Araceli Garcia, and today I will be sharing with you guys how much PathLight has impacted my life. Well, I just want to start off by saying that if someone ever comes up to me and tells me, Araceli, can you describe PathLight using one word? I'll be like, no, are you kidding me? No, PathLight cannot be described nor expressed using one word. PathLight in a whole is just a blessing sent from God for my life, for the life of many other kids that feel that they don't have a future ahead of them. That is how I felt when I did not have PathLight in my life. I felt I had no future. I felt I had no purpose. But God said, I'm going to place this light in your path, which is PathLight, and they will guide you to your purpose. They will show you that there is hope in your path. And that is how amazing PathLight is for my life. I love my PathLight family. I love you guys so much. My heart will always hold a special place for you guys because you guys are just amazing. I will forever love you, and I will forever be grateful for everyone, my sponsors, everyone. I love you guys so much. Stay safe, and I hope to see you guys soon.
How's that for heartwarming?
Oh, that was great. That was great. And you know, I started doing some because of social media. Met a few of the graduates, and they'll get in touch. I know somebody now has a baby, and it's so amazing to watch her be a mom, right? So yeah, that was heartwarming. And it's every word of what she said is true. And I believe so many of the kids at PathLight feel the exact same way, Roy. So I'm grateful to support this ministry.
Araceli is one of our little Esthers, I think. She's going to speak the power. She's something else. I'm assuming that you'd agree. All of us have from Esther such a time as this moment. And we all need to become brave. Talk to me about that. How can we identify our time, and how can we be brave?
Yeah, I think the first word that popped in when you said that was the notion of silence. I think that the way good Christians have learned not to cause trouble is that we don't do a bad thing. We just don't do no thing. You know, we don't, we don't.
We're going to quote you on that one. That's a good one.
And that nothing is becoming more and more problematic, because to do nothing is to already choose to keep what is already destructive going on. For Esther to know that people's lives are going to be destroyed, she has now read the political edict that says this is going to happen on this day, and these people's lives are going to be many of them are going to die. Others of them are going to experience great trauma. Others of them are going to be terrorized by the thought of a pending doom. And Esther, you have the potential to say something about it. And her first response is like all of ours. I can't do that. I mean, it would jeopardize my job. What would my church think if I preach about something like this? What will my friends say? Or if I start going, they're going to think I'm getting political, or whatever the case might be, whatever we fear. And her fears were valid. Our fears are valid. But Mordecai says to her and to us, if you keep silent at such a time as this, God will raise up someone from someplace else. And that's a real instructive thing for us as Christians, because I think this is an opportunity for those of us who say that Jesus really has reconciled us. This is a chance for us to show people what that looks like. And so I would say the very first thing we can do is choose to take a deep breath, swallow hard, and say something. When you hear things like, and this is, I mean this, I don't mean it without any partisan push to it at all. The coronavirus is the coronavirus. It is not the China virus. Every single time someone refers to it like that, people of Asian descent, be they Chinese, Korean, Japanese, those people's lives are put in danger, because there's somebody who hears that and interprets that to mean that people who are Asian are somehow dirty, unclean, and bringing disease with them. And I personally know people who attend my church for whom they've been accosted in public places like Costco or other shopping centers. We as Christians have got to correct that and be willing to take it on the chin and say, God bless you, but that's not accurate. And every time we say that, someone has the potential of being hurt by those kinds of, divisive terms, those ways of referring to people. That's the first thing I would say, Roy. I think we have to do two things. One, tell the truth, break the silence, care enough to break the silence. I'm always starting three things. One, break the silence, say something, but you can't say something if you're not informed. So you got to do a better job of learning what's actually happening. And that can't just be what comes across your news feed. You almost have to read some stuff for yourself, so that when you say something, you at least have enough information to feel like, I've done some work to know that this is not a good thing. So that's why I'm saying it, right? Say something, but be informed when you do. That I think is a good way to start in breaking the silence, because silence is violence. And I'm convinced that it is not a passive act not to say something when you know people's lives are on the line.
Right. Yeah, it's you mentioned saying something, and also earlier you talked about listening, and that's where wisdom comes into play, right? Is there's a time to listen and a time to say something.
Yeah.
We need to be more alert to the Spirit in our heart on that, I believe.
Yeah. Hey, Roy, would you say more about that? Because see, this is where you come into my life. You're contemplative more than I'm kind of like, when you say more about the wisdom, can you say more about that? Because I think that's a word that we need to hear right now.
Well, there's always this almost contradiction and this conflict between, I need to step back and listen. And that's perhaps especially true for me as a white male.
Mm-hmm.
But I also need to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this tension between that exists, I think. And wisdom comes into play as we learn and understand, and then apply what we learn and understand to when to do which. So there's times where I might not say anything, and I would turn to someone like you and say, help me, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
As you have done with me at times.
Yep.
And you have to, and that gets back to your community. You have to do that at times. You're going to speak up, of course, but it doesn't hurt to pause, reflect, learn, and speak up wisely.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely, and that's, you know, I just voted last week. I was going on a trip, and I thought, let me just do this before I leave for this trip. And I had to read a lot to understand the propositions and the amendments. They were like, you know, I thought this is a college educated ballot, but one way we speak up is how we vote. You know, and I had to read that stuff. Literally, some stuff was easy. I got it. Okay, I'll circle this. But some stuff I had to literally look up. What is this proposition about? Who will it impact? What will it mean to the environment? What will it mean to this situation? What will it mean to that situation? But the more we get informed, our voting is a way to use our voices. And the fact that we're having this conversation so close to an election in this country, I think is instructive. That's one way that we break our silence. And Mordecai is right. If we keep silent, eventually, he said, somebody else will take our place. Somebody else will do what we should have done. And you will miss out on what it would have been to be used by God. When you can say, when we were at this point in time for such a time as this, where were you, Dr. Brenda? Where were you, Roy? Where were you, so-and-so? And I want to be able to say, I was there. I spoke up. I said something. I wasn't perfect, but I gave it a shot, you know? Right. And I think that that's what we're being offered right now for such a time as this. We, all of us, everyone listening to us, we have this opportunity right now to make some dent in history so that when children's children ask where we were, we'll be able to, with confidence, say, oh, I spoke up. I did this, I said that, and I think that this is an opportunity for us actually to really get a chance to practice what we preach.
Yeah, that's great. So Dion, my wife Dion, listened to your book on Audible, and every now and then she'd hit pause and type out something that you said. And she texted me a question she wanted me to ask. You write in the book, racism is a systemic evil that robs people of their ability to thrive. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah, it's a sense that it's not just discriminating against people as if it's like, yeah, we know racism exists, right? But there are implications to what that means, that we have this racialized society where certain people are given opportunities, are perceived a certain way. For example, my son, who is brilliant and beautiful, and, you know, I'm a mama, so he's just great. He's just great, right? His first name is Omari. Interestingly enough, we gave him that name because it's a name from Kenya. It means God is highest. We wanted our children to have both a name that represented culture and a name that represented our Christianity. So his middle name is Emmanuel. And we thought as young parents, we were doing the best thing. Do you know, this is to thriving. Every time his application with his name crosses anybody's desk for a job opportunity, the first thing, whether people are conscious of it or not, that they see a name like Omari, they immediately have a internal trigger that says, oh, Omari. And now that he's older, he's a young adult, he knows that the very sound of his name says something about his race. And whether or not it sways things badly or not, he's never sure if he doesn't get the opportunity to get the interview to show people who he is, just because the very application itself disqualified him. And I'm here to tell you there's research that shows that that happens more times than not. That the sound of a person's name. So if someone says Consuelo, oh, Consuelo, Consuelo's name tells them something about her race. And someone will have a judgment, whether they're conscious of it or not, about whether or not they think Consuelo can do the job or not. That's what I mean by thriving. It happens for everything: job opportunities, housing opportunities, college admissions, all of that stuff can be swayed by the very sound of your name.
Right.
No, go ahead. That's what I'm talking about.
I
Talk to
love
me.
that you mentioned Consuelo because she's on this session with us right now watching. And Consuelo, we appreciate what you're doing in Belize. Yeah. Why do you think it's so hard for Christians to make significant progress in dealing with this issue? Let me just riff on this a minute. My perspective is it feels to me like most of the believers I know that I go to church with, that I interact with, they're good people in their hearts.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's systemic racism, the institutions, the way they're set up, that is just now becoming clear to people. And they're only just now starting to see it. At least white America is only just now starting to see it.
Yeah.
And maybe you could help people understand what systemic racism is a bit. Good luck with that, by the way. Yeah, we're all trying to figure it out. And then just riff a bit yourself on why are we struggling to make progress on this?
Yeah. Well, a racialized society basically says that the issue of human differences based on race is woven into the fabric of every single system and institution that from the foundation of our country. And that's just the truth, whether we like it or not. And it started because as human beings, we try to categorize things by deciding what is this? What is that? Animal. Okay, this is a tree. And so that's what the brain does. The brain tries to put things in categories, but Greek philosophical thought saw those categories as a hierarchy. So God was at the top of this hierarchy, and then aristocracy or the aristocrats were in the second tier under angels and then commoners. But when those people began to experience other countries and other places in Asia, in India, in Africa, they had to try to figure out, oh, now where are those people? Where do they fit? And they had animals at the bottom, and they had rocks and trees and so they somehow put them under commoners. To make a long story short, that notion of a hierarchy of human difference made some people more human than other people. And other people were like, no, I think they're more like, see, they have feathers and they live in teepees close to the ground. They're more like animals. And those people from Africa, look at them like they have like the spears and they look primitive. That belief that some people were more cognizant, more intellectual, that led to the whole creation of a society that saw some people as needing to be subdued and trained and civilized, and other people as being more like God. Hence, we create a white Jesus because that must be Jesus because, white is at the top of this hierarchy. That has infused the very fabric of everything we've created and exported around the world. That's what racial societies are doing, right? Now to your question about what makes it so hard for us. We have been educated and trained, every single one of us. We have all drank that Kool-Aid from the very beginning. I can't tell you as a college professor how many of my students, as I'm going through books like The Color of Compromise by Jamar Tisby, that talk about the history of the church and the complicity of the church with white supremacy. And they're like, Dr. Brenda, why have we never heard this? Why did we never hear that there were Black women in the movie? Remember Hidden Figures, Black women working for NASA. Why wouldn't we ever hear that? Because we have a way of telling truth through the lens of the victor. And so what the church is going to have to grapple with is two things, and I'll make this quick. One is I think the church is going to have to grapple with what does it mean to be discipled, because we've discipled people into an individualistic belief about their lives with Christ and therefore their responsibility to the world. Jesus is my personal savior. Jesus came into my heart. And I said the same thing, but that belief that Jesus came into me individually, which is true, is not the whole message of the gospel. Jesus came into my heart. That's the vertical truth. But the horizontal truth that makes the cross is that Jesus, because of that, has connected me to a whole diverse family of every tribe and every nation and every language and every ethnic group. I'm a part of the family of God now. That's the message of the cross. And if I don't hear that when I come to Jesus, I don't understand what I'm buying into. So I want to ask the pastors who are listening to us, could you redisciple your church? Amen. There, I think that's going to be the next step for us. We've got to redisciple the church to believe that it's the vertical and the horizontal that makes us Christians. And then I think this, Roy, I think we got to tell the truth. I think we have anesthetized our history to sound like the winners and the good people who have always done good things. We loved Martin Luther King. He was just wonderful. Amen. He marched. We said, yes, we shall overcome, and we are reconciled. And if we keep telling that story, which is just not true. Right now, people are saying, I don't know about this Black Lives Matter thing because isn't that Marxist? Well, it wasn't that long ago that Martin Luther King was communist. Do you remember? Right. He didn't have a holiday for Dr. King. He got assassinated for a reason. And they called him a communist, and he didn't loot, and he wasn't violent. So we've got to call it what it is. And we've got to say, the truth is, we don't want to lose what we have valued our whole lives. We've come to believe in this hierarchy that we're supposed to be on top, and we're not mean, we'll be benevolent, but the hierarchy says that the world is supposed to be organized a certain way. And I think when we start talking about things like racial reconciliation that challenges that, I think it literally frightens us. And that's why we have to know that perfect love will cast out our fear. That God is not for one group against another group. God just wants us to be united and reconciled in a way that reflects the kingdom of God.
That's great. Bill, thank you for sharing those insights. That's fantastic. What are some concrete ways? You mentioned maybe you're going to be calling the church to do more in this area. And I know we have several pastors on this or watching you and me right now. Mm-hmm. What are some concrete ways the church can work for justice?
Yeah, I think it is contextual in different places. But I think that one, it's beginning to understand that it's not a political thing to care about justice. That it's we've conflated the word partisan and political. Political, it means policies. And when I was coming home from Costa Rica, because I have a heart for Latinos and I love to speak Spanish, or I'm trying. One day in heaven I'll be fluent. But I remember I was asked to go to Washington, D.C. to talk about immigration, and I didn't want to go because I'm not an expert. I don't know as much about that as I do about the other things I talk about. But as I was coming through customs back into the United States, literally I looked at both the line coming into the country for U.S. citizens and Canadians and the non-residents, and both were very, very diverse. Long story short, I thought in my mind, wow, we already have enough diversity. And I felt like God said, check your scarcity thinking. Watch your scarcity thinking, because that's what makes you want to keep people out. That fear that there's not enough for everybody. God really does want for other people what God wants for me. And if we pastors who are listening, if we begin to help people to understand that this is not a zero-sum game. This is not if you thrive, I don't. God is a good God who has plenty, and we don't have to hoard or be afraid of each other. That level of xenophobia has got to be addressed. And so I would say, one, we've got to begin to directly preach about and teach about the fact that God, from the beginning of our being the people of God, from Abraham, God blessed Abram so that all the families of the earth would be blessed. That's why we care about education reform. That's why we care about health care. That's why I'm concerned about the 545 children that have still not been able to be reunited with their parents. These are not political issues or partisan issues. These are humane issues that it looks like to love our neighbors as ourselves. So I would say practical steps would be identify something in your context that your congregation could actually care about, do something about, and then use your voices, your votes, your solidarity to get involved somehow, because the closer, the more proximate you get to something, and this is in the book, Becoming Brave, I think sometimes we have been in these little bubbles, if you will, where cul-de-sacs, where we literally don't know what's going on. So how about take a pilgrimage and go places where you actually get to talk to real people and get to hear the narrative of their lives, and then ask God, what then must we do? I think it comes out of that.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. I wrote one time, we're guilty of locking our doors to drive through a bad neighborhood on the way to the airport so that we can fly to Africa to serve others. And,
That'll preach.
yeah.
Say it again. Say it again.
You use it. My days of preaching are over. But the idea that we need to serve our neighbor, and find a way in our context to do that. I love that answer. It's well said. We have, in addition to pastors, we have a fair number of educators that are on this and listening and learning from you. I think it's fair to say, and I hope you would agree, that when you teach, you learn how to become brave.
Mm-hmm.
And the folks that are teaching, whether it's in a church context or a classroom or in even something like this with you and I up here, you will become brave if you're teaching. Can you maybe say a few comments on that one?
Oh, yeah. Let me tell you why. And this is really good because I just taught class yesterday and we taught on gender equality. And one of my students said, Dr. Brenda, my head is spinning. I know it is. And mine is too. I believe in young people. I really do. If people ask me, where am I getting hope these days? It's in the energy that's coming from the generations coming behind us. And so I want to say to educators, students are going to inherit a world that is radically different than the world we grew up in. And they need to be prepared for a globalized society. They're begging us. They're asking us to introduce them to other schools of thought, that we don't just use white persons or white men's books. And that's not to say that we don't want to read white men's books, but they're inheriting a global society where they're having to understand different points of view, and they're going to work in a workplace that's going to demand that kind of competency of them. And if we don't introduce them to Langston Hughes poems or Audre Lorde or, Justo Gonzalo, we have to show people that there are people out there who are writing from different points of view. Shane Claiborne, Sung Chan Ra, there are people that we can introduce them to. And more importantly, we can model something for them, because we are losing a generation of people, young people from the church. So they're looking at professors and educators and they're wondering, are what they're being told the truth? Are they being prepared for the world that's demanding something radically different from them than was demanded of their parents? And then finally, they're wondering, can they trust us? As Christian educators, are we complicit or are we hypocritical? They literally, I don't use the word hate a lot. It's a strong word. They hate hypocrisy. And they can see it coming a mile away. I'm talking right now to white Americans who are listening to me. I teach at a white Christian college, and I'm telling you, it is young white Christian students who are giving up on the church. They don't believe us anymore. They don't believe you. They don't believe. They can see the disconnect and the complicity with injustice, and it doesn't register. Too many people in their lifetime, they don't even remember 9/11. I talk about that and they look at me like, what? So they have seen political lying and it's become normative. They've seen preachers who don't tell the truth. They've seen parents who've made promises and not kept them. And now they're wondering, can they trust Christian adults? So we have a huge, huge job in front of us as educators to reclaim the authority and the credibility to introduce them to the critical ability to think and to make decisions that inform their lives. I hope we understand that we've been called to the kingdom for such a time as this.
No, I love that. I love that. And way to wrap that up. PathLight works a lot with teachers, and I'm actually going to ask Roger to join us now again to share a little bit about that. And Roger?
Yeah, I'd like to do that because Brenda, you're an educator, and we do work with students, incredible students like Araceli, who we saw in the video. And part of that work is really trying to identify those children who have that greatest potential for academic success and leadership, and yet the least means financially to fulfill these dreams. But a lot of our work is with teachers as well, and we try to do so at the systemic level with the teachers. We have a formal memorandum of agreement with the Belizean Ministry of Education, and together we work with them to provide continuing professional development through workshops and conferences and access to one of our 6 regional teacher education and resource centers. We provide assessments and coaching and classroom interventions, and we're doing that with, right now, almost 1 out of every 4 teachers in Belize. And what I want to do is really quickly show just a 1-minute video from one of these teachers talking about the impact that these kinds of interventions and this kind of work is having. Watch this.
Good day, my name is Felicia Castillo. I am a teacher at Alpines Anglican School. Being a teacher today in Belize is very challenging, from not being able to physically teach our students to not having the necessary resources to provide effective online sessions. Thanks to PathLight and the teacher training team, we were provided with amazing digital training. This digital training will help us, the students, the parents, and the wider community as we go through this new normal. PathLight has helped me as an educator to reach my potential and to obtain the necessary classroom resources I will need to prepare these home packages. PathLight had made a difference in my life to help me face these challenges. Thank you, PathLight, for truly helping me be a pioneer in this ever-changing landscape of education. Thank you.
I love that. You know, Brenda, you're an educator, as I said. My understanding is when Roy contacted you about setting this up, you said, you know, I'll speak today if I can kind of help bless some of these teachers like Miss Felicia and maybe encourage some of our listeners to do the same. And you know about PathLight's Beacon program. And here is the commercial. For only $26 a month, someone's able to provide everything we just mentioned to one specific teacher like Miss Felicia and to her classroom. And the classrooms in Belize, you're impacting at least 25 or more kids by doing that for a very small monthly amount. And so you said, you know, you wanted to sign up to be a part of our Beacon program, but you've also made it possible for us to offer to all of those who are listening today, if you sign up today to join our Beacon program, we're going to send you a free copy of Brenda's book, Becoming Brave. You can do so on the webpage that is listed below. It should be scrolling below, pathlight.org/Brenda. And so if anyone does sign up for our Beacon program today, or if anyone makes a one-time donation of $100 or more today, we're going to send you a copy of Brenda's book, just our way of saying thanks. And Brenda, you know, it's been so good to have you with us today, and I just want to personally say thank you. And thank you, Roy, as well. But Roy, I know you have a few more closing remarks to share with everyone before we wrap it up. So back to you.
I'm like you, Roger. I just want to say thank you, Brenda. This has meant a lot to us, and it's a pure joy for me, frankly, to be talking to you and sharing with you. And there you are. You're back now.
Here I am.
And it's been a lot of fun. You've taught me new things. Even after reading the book, I've learned new things.
Yeah. Hey, and I think I got a new thing. I don't write about money in the book, do I? I don't think I say anything about money. And I want to say right now and go on, be public about this. I am going to become a Beacon sponsor. I've always wanted to support PathLight in a more consistent way. And I want to really, and this, I'm not a commercialist, so I want you to know, I do think that our money does talk. So I've already said, I think we're going to vote like we care. And we're going to demonstrate that. I think we ought to shop and use our money and invest it in ways that demonstrate we care. So I'm hoping, Roy, I pray that as a result of this conversation, one way we can become brave is to say the work that these women are doing, the work that these teachers are doing, the work that the potential, what that can happen with ththese students who, like Araceli, who's basically saying, this PathLight gave a light on my path toward my destiny. Oh, that's worth $26 a month to me. And I'm hoping that churches will say, yep, this is one way that we can tangibly invest ourselves in saying, we're going to do these kinds of things, not just as an act of mercy and missions, but so that we can start to figure out what it looks like for us to support justice in tangible ways. These are tangible ways to take a next step.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. We're gonna take that clip and put it and just blast it everywhere on the internet now. So I so appreciate you, Brenda. Thanks for taking this hour and sharing your story and about your book. And folks, it's a great book. Don't just let it sit on the nightstand. Read it, because it will hit your heart. So thank you, my friend. And thank everybody for joining us today. It was fantastic. And I'm so glad you signed up and registered for this. We're going to try to do it every year, hopefully more in person next time, but maybe we'll live broadcast that in the future as well. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.